Okie dokie. What's up, dudes? How's everyone doing? It is a pretty stormy Saturday afternoon. It's raining outside, but we do have some good light coming in nonetheless. We're talking about button locks today. I've recently gotten some button locks in, newer ones. The CGRB Pyrite, the Kaiser Cormorant, and the Spyderco Smock. Now, these will each get their own individual reviews, but I wanted to do a kind of generalized video on these new button locks that I've gotten and some thoughts that I have on them in comparison with some older button locks that I have in my collection. Because I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts regarding button locks that I wanted to share with you guys. So, before we get into it, if you are watching and you're not subscribed, why the heck aren't you? Go ahead and do it. Follow me on Instagram at duties_daggers also. So, these are all the button locks that I currently own. We have the Orion Knives Solaris. Really like this one. I like all these, by the way. We have the CGRB Pyrite, which I just got in yesterday. We have the Civivi Altus, pretty similar to the CGRB. Really like this one also. We have the Kaiser Cormorant. Got it recently as well. Very cool knife. The Civivi Conspirator. Great, bigger work knife. Biggest of the bunch. And then the Spyderco Smock. Sweet ass knife. So, I'm going to take a couple of these off the screen for a second. First, I want to talk about the buttons themselves. So, I wanted to talk about the buttons themselves. This is not. I'm not going to be talking about the actual function of the button as it relates to the action of the knife. That's kind of irrelevant for this topic. I'm talking about how it feels when you push these buttons, because there are differences. And we'll get into action later on. But I wanted to get into just kind of how it feels to push these different buttons. So we have 3 different brands here. And you can see that the Cormorant, its button sticks out the farthest from the surface of the scale. You can see it popping out right there. Then if we look at the Pyrite, it's sticking out a tiny bit, but just barely. And then if we look at the Civivi, it's pretty much exactly flush with the scale here. Now it is recessed back in this little milled out spot, but that's irrelevant. It's flush with the top of the scale. All of these, in fact, have their own little kind of area milled out. You can see it on the Cormorant there and the Pyrite here. So they all have that little spot milled out. That doesn't. I don't know why it's there on this knife in particular, because the button is still poking out past the surface of the scale. This little cutout here, milled out spot, does not do anything. It really doesn't do anything. So I like it when a button is flush with the surface of the scale. I also like it when there's not a lot of travel with the button. You don't have to push the button in too far before it disengages the plunge lock. And that's just a feeling kind of thing. It doesn't affect the action. It just feels better when you don't have to push that button in quite as far. And on the Pyrite and the Civivi here, they've done a very good job of that. The Cormorant, however, because it's sticking out so far, you just have to push it a little bit farther in for you to get, to disengage the lock. That's not ideal to me. I don't really know why they couldn't have just chopped the top of this button off, and made it shorter. You know what I mean? I don't think that wouldn't have hurt anything. It's not like it's gonna disappear behind the scale, So that's something that's just a little nitpick with the Cormorant here. On the Conspirator, It's the same as the, it's sticking out slightly more than the other Civivi here, the Altus. You can see right there, but still pretty good. The Orion Knife Solaris, however, it doesn't have that little cutout, and it's sticking out pretty far. For some reason, it doesn't bother me on this one because it's such like a kind of a thick, crazy design. For some reason, it feels right on this knife. On these smaller knives, having it stick out like that doesn't feel ideal to me. So that's just a little nitpick as far as the buttons go. Another little thing that I really like Civivi that I really like that Civivi does is they kind of dish out their buttons. You can see they've got like a little bit of a bowling effect going on the button, which is cool. Again, just more of a feeling thing. It doesn't affect any of the action or whatever. I like that feeling. This jimping on the button that Kizer does, I don't mind it, but it's not necessary. You don't need jimping on the button. It's not like you're going to be slipping off of it. It's just, doesn't need to be there. The one on the Pyrite is just totally smooth. No texture, no bowled out, just flat. And I like it. It's comfortable. It's very comfortable to push. I really like that button. Now, on the Spyderco Smock, this is not a plunge lock button lock. It's a liner lock button lock, which is, and it's a one of a kind. There's no other knife that has this type of locking mechanism. So you can't really compare it to any other button locks. You can't do a direct comparison, but we can talk about it, It's not a plunge lock. It's actually pushing aside a liner lock that's in there. So, it does stick out quite a ways, but it kind of has to because it has to push that liner far enough to get it over enough to disengage the blade. So you can't do anything about it there. The Smock here is the best button lock ever made, in my opinion, because it has an actual detent ball. All these other button locks here are plunge locks, meaning that there's no detent ball in there. So you're not getting a crisp breakaway when you go to flip the knife. I will say, though, that Civivi, especially here on the Altus, has done a pretty good job of getting a fairly crisp breakaway. Even though there's no detent ball, they've machined this plunge lock and the tang in there in such a way that you do get a relatively crisp breakaway. Same with the Pyrite. I was really impressed to see that the thumb stud action on the Pyrite is actually pretty good. It feels just like a regular detent ball knife. A knife that has maybe a lighter detent than usual, but it still feels pretty good. This thing is fun to flick, man. It pops out nicely. It doesn't feel sluggish or mushy. I love it. The Cormorant here feels a bit mushy to me. There's not a lot of snap going on here. There's not a pronounced sound when it locks out in the open position. It kind of just makes a little dull, like, thuk. I don't know if you'll really be able to tell the difference on the video, but it doesn't make a satisfying sound as it opens, and it doesn't feel satisfying to flick it either, which is kind of disappointing because I really wanted to love everything about this knife. And I do love everything else about the knife besides the flicking action. I wish it felt more like the Altus here, where you get a little bit of a crisper breakaway, or the Pyrite, crisper breakaway. I wish they had done it differently. And I'm not a knife maker, so I don't know how difficult that is to do. I don't know if there's a reason why they didn't on this particular knife, something with the design or the multiple deployments. I'm not sure. But from my perspective as a knife collector and knife enthusiast, I wish it was snappier and I wish it didn't feel so mushy. But it's still a fun knife. I mean, all the deployments work fine. It's not like I'm failing this thing, failing to open this thing every time. Hardly at all, actually. I can pretty reliably flick this thing. It's just not as satisfying to flip as other knives, which is my point. Now, excuse me. Now let's talk about these two knives in particular, because these are actually really similar. The Altis is a little bit shorter than the Pyrite, but they're very similar button locks, right? They're both thumb stud only. They're both thumb stud only button locks, which there aren't a huge number of. There's the Raccoon, that is a thumb stud button lock, and I'm sure there's more, but there's not a whole lot. The thumb stud button lock is probably my favorite configuration of a button lock. The reason for that is when you flick it with the thumb stud, your thumb's already right here by the button. So you can open and close this thing just really fast. You don't have to move your thumb very far to get from the button to the thumb stud. I just like that. I mean, look how fast I'm opening and closing the knife. This might be the fastest this might be the fastest opening and closing a knife that's ever been recorded, ever. That's just crazy. It's fun to do. I like that. And, they don't have to make sure that the plunge lock breakaway, whatever's serving as the detent in there, they don't have to make sure that that is tuned well for a flipper tab as well. They can just dial it in and get it perfect for the thumb studs, and then that's it. When you have multiple deployments, like on the Cormorant or the Chevalier here, the Conspirator, you have the flipper tab and the fuller. They're both kind of mushy. The flipper tab, mushy. Reverse flicking fuller, a little better, but still kind of mushy. I can super easily fail this thing. I just think with the thumb stud only, like I said, they're dialing in the thumb stud action. They're getting that perfect. They don't have to worry about changing it and getting it, tuned for, a flipper tab as well. So that might be why the thumb stud button locks seem to be a bit crisper. That might be why. I mean, these are the only two button lock thumb stud openers that I have, so these are the only ones I have for reference, but it does seem to me that that might be one of the reasons. The Solaris here, they nailed it though with this one, with the flipper tab and the thumb stud. Both feel really good to flip. So I know it's possible. I know that it's possible, and I don't know why they didn't make that happen on the Cormorant. It is possible. It might be more difficult to get it tuned for 2 deployments, but it is possible because this knife nails it. Also, I don't know if this is only the case on this version of the Cormorant, the Serape version that just came out. If you guys have another version of the Cormorant, let me know. If it also feels a little bit mushy and kind of sluggish, I'd be curious to know. So, with all that being said, the Smok here is really the best button lock ever. And, I don't know if you can, like I said, it might not really qualify because it's not technically a plunge lock button lock like all the other ones. So I don't know if you really can say it's the best button lock ever, but I'm going to say it anyways because there is a button, you know what I mean? But as far as plunge lock button locks go, I love all of them, but this Pyrite here, man, oof, it just feels crisp and nice. It feels great, man. It feels really great. I love that knife. So that's all I kind of wanted to say. Just kind of rant about mushy button locks. I'm a little disappointed with the Cormorant. Like I said, I wanted to love this knife, and I do like it a lot. It's just that mushiness just bugs me, man. It just bugs me. It's unfortunate, but it might not bug you. So don't let it deter you from checking out the knife. But I'm just giving you my perspective on it is all. So that's about it. I'm going to go check the mailbox because I have an extremely extremely badass knife coming. A knife that I have always wanted for so long. It is my ultimate grail knife. I've never wanted a knife more than I wanted this one. And I finally got one. So, you probably won't see that video until tomorrow or possibly the next day, but it's coming. It's going to be epic. All right. Thanks for listening to The Rant, folks, and I will see you in the next video. Adios.